Southwest Fire Academy was established in 2015 as a response to the recognized need for quality, safe, and affordable fire and rescue training in Ontario. This is not your average fire college. SFA has high standards for their students, and it is their mission to teach and produce qualified, ambitious firefighters who are prepared to work hard to serve their communities. This is not a diploma mill. This is where you can learn strategic, aggressive firefighting from passionate, intelligent instructors who never forget why they were made to do this job. SFA is an accredited private career college that is regulated by the Ministry of Training, colleges, and universities, with a memorandum of understanding with the Office of the Fire Marshal. This means that SFA is an approved training provider with the OFM, and the programs are recognized in Ontario. Check out their pre-service and expanding selection of course offerings at southwestfireacademy.ca. Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 132 of Multiple Calls. I'm Scott Hewlett. Judgment of people on calls we respond to can happen reflexively, especially if it's culturally acceptable. Maybe it's a way of distancing ourselves from the problems we can't fix, feeling better about ourselves given what we may be dealing with in our own lives, or compassion fatigue from seeing the same problems, and sometimes the same people with the same problems, over and over again with no sign of hope. It's unrealistic to think that everything works out in the end for everyone. The job quickly tears down that naivete. And we are only human. Lack of sleep and stress doesn't often bring out our best. It's easy to tell ourselves that the public we interact with can't tell if we're annoyed, irritated, or frustrated. And after all, they created the problem that put us there in the first place. So we can somehow justify our perspective and attitude. But consciously or subconsciously, even unconsciously, something is added to the situation or taken away from the person and us. Maybe it's too much to ask of ourselves and of each other to put on our shiny, happy people faces before we step out of the truck and not blow off the steam when we get back in it. Every shift, every month, for years. But what if we could just move the needle to neutral, not apathetic or indifferent? Just not energetically cutting. Can we respect and protect someone's dignity even at their most undignified? Even if our initial motivation to try is simply to hold on to our own. Here's my chat with Gavin Chapman.
All right, man, let me get to know you. So start off with where you grew up and tell me a bit about your family growing up.
I was born in Niagara Falls. My mom and dad were together not long before, like they knew each other their whole lives, but not long before I was born. Like I always like to say, my dad's been married 3 times and I've been at all 3 weddings, but I was in my mom in the first one. But they divorced when I was very young. My mom's a nurse, retired recently, and my dad was a factory worker. And I only have a couple memories of them together. We were in a town called Chippewa right beside Niagara Falls. They had a pretty amicable divorce in front of me, and I have a younger brother, almost 2 years younger than me. But there was a lot of tension between them, for sure. It wasn't the greatest. And like I said, I'm going to be very authentic and real with this. My dad fooled around on my mom, and so there was a lot of heartbreak there. So my mom moved out of Chippewa because she just couldn't stand seeing him every day. It was such a small town, right? Everybody knew everybody. So she moved to Stony Creek, Hamilton, where she was working at St. Joe's at the hospital there. So it became a system with my mom during the week and with my dad on weekends. And my brother, he's always kind of been the yin to my yang, where he's always been super cool, super calm, funniest guy I know, really chill, where I always just seemed to struggle as a kid. I don't remember a time not struggling mentally. Obviously, they didn't have the labels they have now, but I remember like my mom brought me to a therapist when I think I was in grade 3. And I just remember being outside the office and hearing him talk to my mom and him saying, "You have a very sad little boy." I was always worried about something and I didn't know why, no matter what it was. Like I can remember being at my dad's on the weekend and just going over a checklist in my head of what I said at school that week, what I did at school that week, who I interacted with, how I interacted. Do they like me? Do they not like me? coupling that with, is dad mad at me? Is mom mad at me? Have I done something wrong? There was just a constant worry in my head. And that followed me for so long. I don't remember not feeling that way. It seemed normal at the time, I guess, but looking back now, like I almost feel a tragedy for my little self. And I couldn't imagine my little guys. I'm a father now, and my kids feeling that way. And my parents were trying their best. Like there's no onus on them. They're wonderful, wonderful people, but they didn't know what to do, and we didn't have the resources then that we do now. And my mom, very hardworking woman. We were with babysitters a lot. I'm sure that didn't help things at all. Move forward a bit to when I get a little bit older, start reaching the teen years of 12 years old, 13 years old, and I tried alcohol for the first time. And I thought, oh, this is how you do this with life. Because everything went away. The fear went away. The worry went away. The sadness went away. Everything in that little bubble of intoxication went away. And again, at the time, I didn't know it. But it was in that moment that it was like, oh, this is it. This is how people live. This is how you have to live, because there's no other way that people are comfortable in their own skin.
How did the access to the alcohol and that start?
I remember the very first time I ever drank, I stole a bottle of vodka from my mom and my stepdad, who's still in my life. He was in my life from a very young age. He's a retired police officer. They had a liquor cabinet, and I stole a bottle of vodka from it. And it took me about 10 years till I could drink vodka again after that first time. But that was the first time. My dad was in Alcoholics Anonymous. They distinguish between an alcoholic and a big drinker. My dad definitely falls into that big drinker category. Kind of layman's terms would be like a functional alcoholic. So he drank all my life, loved to drink, but he's the type of guy. How you differentiate it, how I like to differentiate it is, if we were to go camping, you and I, Scott, and you were a big drinker, you would get your tent set up, you'd get your barbecue set up, you'd get your sleeping arrangement set up, and then you'd get wasted. I would show up, get absolutely wasted, not set up my tent, not set up my barbecue, sleep in my car for the weekend, not eat. That's kind of the little difference between an alcoholic and the big drinker. So my dad fell into that category. So once drinking became normalized for me as I got older, not of age, but 15, 16 years old, I would drink with him on the weekends. Kind of what our weekends would revolve around. In the garage, we'd have beers, we'd cook food, and we'd hang out and laugh. I developed that tendency to seek intoxication for comfort, but then also I found comfort in humor, in laughter. And I knew if I was making someone laugh, they were having a good time with me. It was a huge connection piece for me. And I kept that. Still to this day, it's something like my wife will be the first to say I'm the guy that never takes anything seriously. Almost sometimes to a detriment that again, if I can make you laugh, you like me. You're not mad at me. You're not upset. Where we have no tension. And that's kind of where I developed that, I would say. And that was where we spent our weekends, just laughing and joking around. And it just became habitual at that point.
How'd you do in school, especially since you were dealing with this at the same time?
I did oddly. School always came pretty naturally to me. Like I had huge problems focusing, but I could get the work done. And that anxiety, I think, played a big part of it. I didn't want someone mad at me, so I'd always do my homework, right? I was never one to procrastinate. If I came home with homework, I was doing it right away. And then because now I don't have that anxiety looming over me. So that definitely aided in school. My marks were always really good. I did go to college after high school. I did really well in college. It was journalism, but I graduated with honors. Like I always did really, really well, especially come the college time, considering my state of intoxication.
And what about sports?
Sports I loved my whole life. Being part of a team always meant something to me. Like with sports, I played baseball my whole life. Once I got into high school, fell in love with rugby, played in football, played on the water polo team. I played every sport I could, played on the volleyball team. Everything I could, I played. And it was, I think, looking back now, it was so much of that. If you're a part of something because you're good at something, you're automatically a part of that. You're not going to get ostracized. You're not going to be left alone. I always had a fear of being left alone, and I always felt very alone. Always afraid of not having friends, of not having people that wanted to be around me.
Was the drinking sort of normalized and celebrated in those circles as well?
100%, especially come high school. The group of friends I joined, who are some of them I'm still friends with to this day, it was all based around drinking. I was good at it. I liked it. I could party with them. So I was accepted in that group. At least in my mind, that's what I told myself. That's why I was accepted in that group, right? And it became super, super normalized. Every Friday, Saturday night was a party. And I was always deathly afraid to lose that, to the point of unhealthiness, afraid to lose that.
What about guides and mentors? Your dad was obviously a big influence on you, but what about anybody else?
Yeah, my stepdad was a massive influence on me. I would say even to this day, my biggest influence on me is my mom. Not to sound like a mama's boy, but she's the strongest woman I know. A lot of our lives, she was on her own. She's a very strong woman, strong-willed. She put herself through school, waitressing while she was in nurses' school in Toronto. She is someone that's always been there. In my early 20s, my dad the factory business, obviously, as we know in Southern Ontario, was kind of going to crap. He took it upon himself to get some schooling in him, and he became like a worker it started with like disabled people, like almost like a respite work for disabled people. And then he went to children, and he became like an EA. He worked with troubled kids. The work for him and his whole family was in BC. So in my early 20s, he moved to BC, which rocked me. It absolutely destroyed me mentally. My mom was always that rock in the river. She was always there. When I moved to Caledonia, when I met my wife, she moved to Caledonia. When I moved to Port Dover a few years ago, she moved to Port Dover, her and her husband. And she's just always been there with me. She's Mrs. Reliable. And even working in the hospital with her, which I'm sure we'll touch on, like I worked in the hospital for about 7 years. She got me the job, and seeing her in there in that environment as a leader, she was the charge nurse, and the respect she commanded and gave to others is something that's followed me. And that's who I want to be one day when I'm in a leadership role.
You mentioned a few names. Rob Collette came up.
Yeah, Rob Kellett. He's a bar owner in Hamilton. He owns a pub, and it was right around the corner from my house. So I hung out there religiously. But he was someone that took me under his wing and looked out for me on far more nights than I ever deserved. And again, seeing him interact with people and how good he was at understanding human nature and different people, and sometimes very strenuous situations, sometimes joyous situations, but seeing the man he was. And I've always loved seeing how people interact with others and reading other people and kind of thriving off that energy, and seeing him do it. He was someone, in the kindness he showed me, no matter how ridiculous I would be sometimes, especially in my young years, he was someone that always would sit me down and give me advice on life. He's been an amazing mentor to me. Another man, George Gillespie. When I got out of the hospital, I went into real estate because of him. He offered me a position with him, and he was someone that he had such control over his life that I envied it. And it was something that I wanted and couldn't understand in my 20s. He was one of my best friend's fathers, so I knew him. The way he could conduct himself in any situation, I wanted to learn that, but I just wasn't ready at the time. And once I found recovery, and that's when I started working with him, I took in a lot of lessons on life for him. He always had a really cool lesson when it came to drinking. He tried to put on me, but he would say his rule for himself was 1 day a week, 1 week a month, 1 month a year, he wouldn't drink. And that was his way of keeping himself. And I tried it a million times and it never worked. And, obviously the first month I pick is February because it's the shortest. And it never worked. But it just that level of control he had over himself, the discipline, I guess is the word I'm looking for. The absolute discipline he had over himself was something that I eventually wanted to find. And I feel I'm on that right path now.
Mm-hmm. What about Vic McLean?
Vic McLean, he's my best friend. Him and another man, Rob Vino, are my two best friends on the planet. I'll talk about Rob as well. But Vic's a firefighter in Southern Ontario. He's a captain, and he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is something I'm extremely active in. Vic is one of those guys, he can make anybody feel comfortable in any room that you're in with him. And it's his passion that drew me to him. We actually joined the volunteer fire department together. And our first night of orientation was the night we met. And we've been friends ever since. He has that firefighter sense of humor. He's funny, he's smart, and he's 100% what you'd label a fire nerd. Like, he looks at himself in jiu-jitsu and fire as a perpetual student, and that's something that I want to be. 20 years in fire, 20 years in jiu-jitsu, and he still considers himself a white belt in both, right? And you see that compared to some of the egos you can see out there in the world. And that, to me, it's something I never want to lose, that feeling of just always learning, always growing, always building yourself.
You mentioned Rob.
Yeah, so Rob Vino, he is a tattoo artist in Hamilton. We went to high school together, and we both went our separate ways, but both kind of reconnected through recovery. And I love tattoos. I'm covered in them. He's my number one tattoo artist. We reconnected in that world, and he's got a couple more years of recovery than me, but he's always what I call my spiritual guru. He is the most spiritually sound person I've ever met in my life. It's a kind of a catchword nowadays, but like, he's so zen with everything, and the way he keeps himself centered is something I learned from and build off of. And, we still touch base consistently, just messaging. We call it filling each other's cup, right? We're going to fill the cup and have a chit chat about life and where we're at and what we're doing and what we're thinking. And it almost becomes a mini meeting between us, an NA meeting or an AA meeting, just talking about things. And we've almost become each other's sponsors in life. And it's just, he's someone really, really special to me and important in my life.
You mentioned real estate, but tell me about the other jobs you did before you came into awareness of the fire service.
There's a word called factotum. It means a person who's worked many jobs. And I feel like that's it was a Charles Bukowski novel where I learned that word. He called it that. I felt like that. I worked so many different positions in life because I just didn't know what I was or who I was. The main positions I worked in a warehouse for a long time called Westbrook, just coming out of high school and before college. After college, I met my wife. She was with child very fast, and I needed a real job because now I had a family, and that's where my mom helped me get into the hospital. And I worked as an operating room attendant in the hospital. And that was really kind of my very first experience in the employment world of that fish out of water, almost imposter syndrome. Because there was doctors and surgeons and nurses and all these educated health professionals. And then I was just a street kid. My mom helped me get in there, and it was very much learning on my feet. But much like the fire service, it was very personality driven, and you were around these people all the time, and it was understanding, engaging personalities. And that was a great learning experience for me moving on in my life in terms of that. And after the hospital, I went into real estate. I became a real estate agent. I did the course. Again, so personality driven, dealing with people every day, learning patience, learning crisis control, very different crises from the fire service, but high level emotional crisis often. And it was there, I was working as a real estate agent. We kind of bought our dream home, and there was a fire down the road from us. And it's a very old neighborhood. It's an old country road. There's a lot of senior citizens on my road. So I thought, oh no, I raced down there to help. As I raced down there, the volunteer fire service pulled up. And I said, oh, good. I'm glad you guys are here. I just want to make sure everything was okay. And the one guy who I later got to know, he said, well, if you want to help, join. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went home and I was talking to my wife. And, at this time I had re-engaged myself so much into fitness and building myself physically and the mental strength through recovery. And I wanted to give back something. I almost felt like I had lived the life I had in active addiction and taken so much from society. And I'd gone to rehab, which we'll talk about, but of my class of, let's say, 14 people in rehab, 12 of them were dead. So I had this almost survivor's guilt of like I was living so well when I had done so much wrong in my life. And my wife said, well, why don't you join that? Maybe it'll give you some fulfillment in doing something, helping people. You're strong, you're active. This might be good for you. So I applied, got on, luckily, and it was that first time, Scott, walking into the bay at the volunteer fire station where it almost felt like I was breathing air I was supposed to be breathing. I could breathe. And these guys walked in, and they were shaking my hands and throwing hugs, and the brotherhood and the sisterhood of the fire service was something. It was almost like it was something I had sought my entire life, and now here it is, and I can get paid to do this, and I'm helping people, which was the goal of giving back now. It was funny when I applied, Scott, to the fire service. I didn't even know when I heard volunteer. I took it very literally. I thought even the volunteer services in Canada. I thought, oh, like you're doing this for free. I had no qualms. It was thought, awesome. This is great. I'm going to help people. And now I find out I'm going to get money to do this, something that I was more than willing to do for free. That first call that we did, I think it wasn't a big deal call at all. But that was the first time I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what it's not even what I want to do. It's what I have to do. I'm over 30 years old and I've lived so long of kind of trying to find who I was as a human being. And in that moment, it felt like this is it. This is what it's all led to. I can do this. And the first thing you hear when you say you want to join the fire service is, "Oh no, that's impossible." Right? You're never going to be able to do this. Good luck. You've got 8,000 people applying for 12 positions. You'll never get in. It's a pipe dream. Now, I was lucky enough to have real estate providing an income, but I thought I was also told in active addiction I was on opiates at the end, and I was told you'll never get clean if you're not on methadone. It's such a rare chance of getting clean and living. And then after I got clean, it was, well, it's very hard to thrive in life after you've been so low. So all I've been told for those past years leading up to that was that I can't do this, I can't do that. And I've been doing it. I had open heart surgery that I was given a 60% chance to live with. And I lived. And then I was told there were certain things I was never going to be able to do again. And I overcame that, got a full sign off by the cardiologist. So I knew I was under the belief, maybe the naivety of, if I set my mind to it, I can do it. And I dove headfirst into recruitment. It became an obsession for me. And I feel like that's almost what it needs to be. And I did everything, Scott, everything I possibly could to get on the fire service. And it was 1 year after that I was hired into that world. And I heard a few people say the promised land, and that's what it was. It was surreal. That phone call when it came that I'd been accepted to the full-time fire service. I'll never forget. I was driving, and my dad was visiting from BC, and he was in the truck with me, and I had to pull over. I saw that the fire service was calling. They told me, "We want you. You're hired." And it was this incredible moment of elation, followed very swiftly by that old anxiety and fear and imposter syndrome of, "Oh no, what have I done? When is this other shoe going to drop? Like, this can't be real. Something's going to happen. Something's going to go wrong on this path to set me off of this." And it almost prevented me from being too excited. You go through the process in this fire service. You speak to a therapist. You do a mental health session. You've got all the things like the physical, all of that. And I remember being in the room for the therapy interview, and it felt like I was in a room of golden retrievers, and I was a street rat. You know what I mean? It scared the hell out of me. And that imposter syndrome is so real. And I know I can't be the only one that when they were hired that felt like that. Like I was so afraid that I didn't belong that it aided me in researching everything I can for the new firefighter, every YouTube video, every podcast that I could. Now, the leading up to that, where I was so lucky was the people I met along the way in terms of my volunteer service here. And then when I was looking at schools to get my certifications, I was talking to a full-time firefighter that Tom Peterdy had hooked me up with. And he gave me an email list of schools I can go to, and just a little write-up on each one, a little blurb, a paragraph. At the very bottom of the list was SFA. "I think you'll like this one. They're the last of the hardcore assholes," is what they said about SFA.
We'll take that.
And I thought, that's the one I'm going to. Right? I know this is it. This is the one. I have to go here. So went to SFA, decided what would be best for us as a family, because I wouldn't be too far. I only live about 2 hours from the location. So it wasn't too bad of a spot. I wasn't too far from home if anything were to go wrong. At that point, my wife and I had 2 children. I went up there for the kind of the preliminary days there. There's those 4 preliminary days. And I met Brad. And I remember thinking like, "Oh my God, this is a firefighter. Like, he is going to despise me. Like, I'm a walking jester." Right? And immediately he was that what I was talking about earlier. Like, he was that guy that he commands respect when he walks into a room, and he gives it in turn if he receives it. And I thought, okay, I can do that. I'm maybe a little more jokey than he is and everything, but if I give this man the respect he deserves, I think I can receive it in return. And we did. And it was after my first day with Brad that he asked me to be the captain for the squad at SFA for my class. And Scott, going home and telling my wife that something as small as that, it was so monumental in my journey of becoming a full-time firefighter, that it gave me so much confidence that this guy that I looked at is like almost like, and he's gonna probably hate me saying this, but like this supreme being in front of me choosing me and there's these room full of like these Captain Americas, and he chose me to be the captain. And I took it extremely seriously. I wanted to impress you guys. I wanted to be the best leader I could be for you guys. And it was unbelievable, my experience there. I say now that there's no way I would have done as well as I did without SFA. I came out of there a completely changed person, not just as a firefighter, but as a human being, holding myself more accountable, being more humble, understanding that it's okay to take what needs to be taken seriously serious, and it's okay to joke when the moment's right. And it solidified my belief that I needed to be a firefighter. It made that solid for me, and it made that real. And you were a guest instructor there, and being there with Jesse Bond, and then the guys with us day to day, Spence and Joe, like it was unbelievable, that entire experience. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. Like it was, I'm so proud to be a member of the SFA family. Like it was a really great spot.
It's awesome. What about the recruit experience at your full-time department?
It was terrifying. It really was. It was, once we were in, I decided, again, what would be best for the family and the driving and everything. I decided to live with a firefighter in the city. Some friends that I had made connect me with this guy. He said, absolutely, you can rent a room from me. So I could stay there Monday to Friday, come home for the weekends, and head back. It's a 3-month experience. You go there, and the training academy was phenomenal. You become, obviously, I'm sure it happens with every single year, you become so close with your recruit class, and you're living and breathing it together, and you're learning everything you can. And it really, for so many people, it was so funny, because for so many people, they said like, oh, like they don't show you any of this stuff at like fire school. And it, to me, it was like, well, I was shown this stuff. Like I was totally, this is exactly what I learned. Right. I really liked the setup of kind of living there for those days and treating each day like a 24-hour shift at SFA, because it so prepared you for the real world. Going through that recruit process, they show you everything they can, everything the way they do it. And then you're assigned to your squad, and you're out there. And at my fire service, what they do is you spend 3 months at a busy station, another 3 months at another busy station, and then you're called what's on the bounce. You're kind of bouncing around, and the way they do it, so you kind of get to know your entire squad. It's a little bit different than you're at a station and you're there until you're not there anymore, right? I know a lot of departments do that. With us, we're bouncing around for the first few years. You're bouncing around. And right away, that first day, you're just on pins and needles, man. You're trying to do enough where they're like, okay, this guy's a hard worker, but at the same time, you don't want to do too much because you don't want to step on any toes. Or it's such a balance of personalities and work ethic and skill and sociability. Like there's so many things that come into it that I fell in love with the juggling act that first week on the job. It was so exciting. I didn't realize how much of the job would be so personality driven. Like you're with these guys 24 hours at a time. It's so much gauging who you're with and what they need and what they like to see done in a day, right? Like it's so interesting.
And you're continuing to volunteer. Yes,
sir. I still volunteer. I love these guys. It was the foundation for me of what made me love this job and want to be a part of this profession. The lifestyle, everything about it, I adore. And it's constant learning, right? So I get, to me, it's extra training. I get to learn, I get different looks. It's very different calls from a municipality to being out in a county. A lot of things you wouldn't do in the city, you have to do out in the country. So you get a lot of different looks, things like that.
You mentioned the addiction a number of times through that chronology, and the heart surgery as well. Maybe just talk me through that from start to where you are now, lessons learned in the journey, and how you're feeling.
Absolutely. Again, like touching back on the first time taking a drink and knowing at the time that was what I needed. It became more and more habitual to me, to the point where it was a daily basis it was the only way I could function. By the time I was in college, I was drinking every day. And mixing that with the end of high school, kind of being introduced into the worlds of drugs. Like most people, started with marijuana, and then you go into the hallucinogens, mushrooms, things like that. And it wasn't until I kind of slid into stimulants like cocaine and things like that that it really got a hold of me, not so much physically, but mentally, that there was no socializing without this. I need this. And I liked who I was when I was intoxicated and despised who I was when I wasn't. I didn't like having that anxiety. I didn't like having that fear, zero confidence in myself. I like to say, like, I almost became like a Leatherface in terms of I would steal things from other people's personalities to make my own. I didn't know what I valued or what my morals were. It was only who I was with or what I was doing at the time. It was very much a chameleon life. And it led me to, as we got older and as people started branching off with girlfriends and things like that, I didn't want to let that aspect of life go, the getting messed up. It was, I didn't know how. So it just followed me. It followed me through so much, the drinking, the using. And then once I slid into opiates, things like heroin and fentanyl and morphine, that was the first time when I tried them, I thought I was born to be a junkie. I remember having that thought. That was my thinking at the time. My lizard brain told me that it was, this is what I need to do to live, and I will die this way. And it's the only reason anyone will ever be able to stand to be around me. And this is all kind of mid-20s. I was extremely suicidal, strong suicidal ideation. And looking back now, probably the only reason I didn't was my mom. It scared me to death to think that she would find me or when she got the news and how she would feel. And in all this chaos, the craziest thing happened where I met a woman and she was my polar opposite. She didn't really drink at all. She didn't use drugs, didn't smoke, nothing. She was this really good girl. She was a sister of a friend of mine, and she liked me. And I had no idea why, but she did. She liked being around me. We started dating, and then she became with child, and we were having our first baby. And it was like, oh, so life is absolutely kicking me in the teeth here. I'll never forget. I came home one day and I sat down with my mom and I said, Mom, I'm going to move in with Lacey. And she said, who's Lacey? And I said, oh, it's a girl I'm with. And she said, well, why are you moving in with her? And I said, well, Mom, she's pregnant. And my mom stood up and she said, Gav, I'm going to the garage. Do not follow me. Right. So she needed those minutes to process. Once she processed it and she spoke to my stepdad and, they both talked to me and they said, this could very well be the best thing that ever happened to you. Because at this point, Scott, like I had nothing. I had no direction, nothing to live for. I was, like I said, working at a warehouse. I was, at this point, a full-blown alcoholic, a burgeoning drug addict. Death or jail were my only options. Now, in saying all of that, meaning a woman doesn't cure an addict, and I started to live almost like a double life of being now a new father, a new job at the hospital. We eventually got married, but a new girlfriend, soon to be wife. And the other Gavin was this Gavin that was hanging on by a thread, getting to the point of using drugs every single day, hanging out with some really, really rough people, finding brotherhood in those people, but a very different brotherhood than in sisterhood what we have now.
When did your family become aware?
They always knew I abused alcohol, but the drugs, I was able to keep it very, very secret for a very, very long time. I like to joke now in meeting stuff that, I was a great junkie. Because I'm so naturally high energy, I never really nodded off or anything like that. It kind of just brought me to mellow, even the copious amounts I was using. I was always okay. Where it kind of the bottom came out, working at the hospital, they started to recognize that I was looking very sick. Because when you're with someone every day, you don't really notice, right? It's, even as severe as it is, talking to you now, I'm 210 pounds. At the time, I was about 160 pounds. I was withering away. I always wore sweaters, long sleeves. I was very good at hiding it. And the hospital brought something up to my mom. And then my mom started to look into it. And then it kind of became very clear what was going on. So how the end kind of happened, I have a friend who I grew up with in high school, and we were kind of the two wildest guys in terms of abuse and things like that. And he got into recovery a few years prior to this, and he had been doing really well in life through recovery. And we broke off at that point, right? Because I was still using, I was in active addiction. He was in recovery. He showed up at my house one day out of nowhere. My aunt had come, Lacey was working. My aunt had come to pick up the boys. And I had messaged my mom and said, oh, mom, because again, I'm a huge mama suck. I messaged her and said, I'm sick. I'm not feeling good. Because I knew my aunt had seen me. And at the time I was going through some withdrawal. And I didn't want questions to be raised. So I was just kind of, I was laying a foundation of, oh, he must be sick. And my mom didn't answer me, which is so not like my mom, especially if I'm saying I'm sick. And about 10 minutes later, Kevin is his name, pulled into my driveway. And I knew right there that, oh boy, that I know what this is. Not to get too dark, but I had a noose tied in my garage for the day that Lacey found out what I was doing. I knew she would leave me, and I knew she would, like, everything would be exposed. I wouldn't be able to hold on to this juggling act anymore. So I had a noose in my garage, and my plan was but that's the point where I'd kill myself because nobody would want me around anyways, was my thinking. Kevin pulled in, I could see him through my window, and I made a step towards the garage, and I stopped, and I thought, you know what? I've been lying to everybody for so long, I can keep lying. I'll lie my way out of this. And he came in, sat me down on the couch, we did the formalities, and then right away he said, listen, Gav, everybody knows. Everybody knows you're sick. And I said, what are you talking about, man? And you get angry, you try to lash out, right, to kind of make them afraid and go away, and he just kept saying it. He kept saying it. You're sick. You need help. And I said, no, Kev, listen, I'm not. And then breaking a little bit. Well, even if I am, I got to work right now. We've got a mortgage. You've got a kid. Gav, your job knows. Everybody knows. Your parents are waiting around the corner right now. And at that point, the dam broke and I burst into tears. And I said, Kev, I don't know what to do. I want to die. And then he wrapped his arms around me. I don't know how long I laid there like a baby in his arms, sobbing, not knowing how I got to that point, but also at the same time knowing exactly how I got to that point, almost like I welcomed it. All of it was just rushing at me. And he must have messaged my parents. They came, everybody came in, and everybody hugged me. Everybody was saying, it's okay. We love you. We're here for you. At that point, it's time to get better, is what they were telling me. And still that addict in your mind is fighting against that. Well, mom, I got to work. We're going to figure that out. I can't afford to go to rehab. We're going to figure that out, right? There was every barrier that I was trying to put up to why I couldn't do what they wanted me to do. They already had the answer for it because this had been planned, right? Which is exactly what a good intervention should entail. That was it. They brought me, my mom said, you're coming to stay at my house. It's going to be a rough couple weeks for you, but you're going to stay with me and you're not going to be alone for a second. You're not allowed to leave. You're going to be under our lock and key. Right away, we went back to her house and I said, well, mom, now that everything's out in the open, I need to show you something. And I lifted my sleeve and at the time I had a giant abscess on my arm. I would say probably about the size of an orange, like a large orange. And she freaked, right? Like, you're going to lose your arm. What is going on type of thing. Like, I think that really solidified how real everything had become, that at this point I was deep into IV use and I was a sick and dying junkie. We obviously got that taken care of. I was going through withdrawal at my mom's house and it was the most excruciating, nightmarish experience I could ever wish on a human being. It was a walking nightmare every day. The day after the intervention, we went to my doctors and told him what we were doing, told him how much and everything, and kind of got baseline sats on me. After about 2 weeks at my mom's, I wasn't getting better. I still looked awful. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And my mom said, well, we need to go back to the doctors then if you feel this bad. So, okay, let's go. As soon as we walked into his office, he was right there and he dropped his pen. He said, I don't know what to do. You shouldn't look like this. You need to go to the hospital right now. So we went to the hospital. My mom got me in where she works. And first they said pneumonia, which not a big deal. We thought, okay, they put a drain pipe in my back, drained all the fluid out. And at this time too, I was so hell bent. I was 2 weeks clean. I hadn't been 2 weeks clean since I was 13 years old. I refused all painkillers. which I found out later in my recovery that wouldn't have been a relapse. Like, you're allowed to not suffer if it's monitored in its medical procedures, right? But I refused everything. So, like, the drain pipe going in my back and everything was so painful, and it was such a nightmare. But I kept telling myself that, like, this is my penance. If I do this, I'll never forget this pain and everything will be okay. They came in after a few hours in the hospital. They came in and they said, it's not pneumonia, you have infective endocarditis. And when they said that, it was gibberish to me. I didn't know what it meant. But my mom, who was sitting right beside me, started crying. She knew exactly what it was. And my mom, this strong iron woman, bursting into tears, I remember thinking, uh-oh, right? That was my first uh-oh in this whole thing, that maybe I'm not as okay as I think I am. I'm not through the fire yet. So they decided that I was too weak to undergo surgery right away. My body was septic. They were going to try to kill it with 24-hour antibiotics. They put a line in. They were running the antibiotics, and after weeks, it wasn't dying. They said they had to risk the surgery. At that point, it was very much I hope I make it, but if I don't, this is what you need to do, Lacey, type of thing. This time, our oldest was 4, and she was pregnant with our youngest. And this angel of a woman, through all of this, Scott, didn't leave my side. I gave her every reason to leave me. Like, this was not her life, not her world at all. And it was very akin to her of, I may as well have been having a 10-year affair onto her. Scared me to death that she was going to be gone, but I understood it. And she never left. She was with me every single day at my mom's. In the hospital, she was there every single day. And our 4-year-old, who at the time, because of the life I was living, our relationship was so strained. He was scared to be alone with me, and rightfully so. I remember him looking at the doctor and saying, "Are you going to fix my dad?"
Ugh.
And I gave him every reason, him and Lacey, to hate me, and they didn't. They wanted me to live. At this point, I was so resigned to the fact that I wasn't going to live. Again, it was a 60% chance to live, and I knew how I felt. I knew how weak I was. I thought, I'm not going to live this. And this little boy and our little boy that was coming, their dad was going to die a junkie, and that was the legacy I was going to leave behind. And that devastated me more than anything else, that this was how their little boys are going to know their dad. And what made it even worse was I was 2 weeks clean at this point. You know, I was right on the verge of turning everything around. And then I get rocked with that right cross of reality that this isn't the way it's going to be. You're going to die. So they brought me in, and I remember the last thing before surgery, I looked at my wife and I was like, I'll catch you on the flip side. And I didn't lose who I was as a person. And that's something I take pride in today, in terms of, it may not be the healthiest thing, but like, I was joking right up onto the table. The nurse was putting the mask on me. I said, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to make it where I don't go to sleep. You watch, I'll do it. And she said, oh, we'll count down from 10, 9. I was cold, right? But I remember her laughing and finding comfort in that. I woke up in the ICU, and a tube was breathing for me, and I had these tubes coming out of my stomach. And I remember my first thought was, oh my God, I'm alive. And they pulled everything out, and the nurse told me, I don't really remember saying it, but the nurse told me after my first words were, holy shit, I lived. And at this time, it turned out to be, it was an 8-hour surgery. They had told my family they can go home. Like, I could see it was nighttime outside. So I was just laying there, and now it was, okay, I lived. I came with the other side. I remember making a deal with whatever higher power there is before the surgery that if I live, I will change every conceivable aspect of my life, and I will not stop until I found redemption. And even then, I'll keep going. So, you know, going through the process of leaving the hospital, I remember laying in the hospital and seeing a breeze outside, and remembering I would give anything, any conceivable thing I could to feel that breeze one more time, thinking that I wouldn't. And that being wheeled out in a wheelchair by my wife and feeling that breeze, thinking, here we go, here's the ride, right? This is where everything changes and I can do it. And I had a backpack that had a PICC line running to me because for another month I had to have antibiotics running into me. And I was so broken physically, I couldn't do a push-up if my life depended on it. And the whole journey started was maybe a few days after coming home, sorry, because I was in the hospital for about a month after the surgery. I started just going for walks. That was it. And these walks, Scott, were excruciating. Not to be too but defecating myself on the walks. I'm not being able to make it to a bathroom because I couldn't pick up my pace more than a few steps at a time. But I kept going and kept going and kept going, and the walks got further. And then the walks turned into speed walking, and the speed walking turned into jogging, and then the jogging turned into running. And then now it's time to go to the gym. And I remember when first day I went to the gym, couldn't do a push-up. I had to just use the bar. And it was the 25-pound bar, not the 45-pound bar. And just doing reps, as many as I could with that 25-pound bar, and feeling the shame of these monsters around me in the gym, but thinking like, they don't know my story. They don't know where I'm coming from. It doesn't matter. Just keep going. Just became more and more. And then through all of this, the support with my family and bringing me to meetings every single day, 12-step meetings. Me personally, I ended up finding and loving Narcotics Anonymous and finding a community of people there that, again, without borders, loved me and brought me in. I'll never forget the first meeting I went into. I walked in, and at this time I was going through withdrawal. I was sick and I was scared. And there was a group of people sitting there, and I said, "Oh, is this the Narcotics Anonymous meeting?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm really scared, guys." And they all got up and came and hugged me. One guy put his coat on me because he could tell I was dope cold. And someone handed me a coffee. Like, it was this family of people that my family, for as much as they loved me and as much as they wanted to be there, they didn't understand. These people understood. They had all been there. And I could see in them where they were now. And at the time, I couldn't even take a sip of a Powerade without throwing it up. And I could see these people smiling and laughing and joking and being happy and not sick, and thinking, this is where I can find that. That became everything to me. Getting my 12 steps done, going to these meetings, building up some recovery time, now volunteering in that world, sponsoring people, doing like meetings and speaking at the detox centers, being invited to schools and speaking. And it just grew. It just kept mushrooming out bigger and bigger and bigger, that not only can I be clean and sober, but I could become something that matters to people in their journey and helping them. In my mind, I was still that guy that people didn't want me showing up to their party because it would be absolute chaos. But now there's people inviting me to places and asking me to speak and wanting to hear how I did what I did. That's where that spark was lit, of wanting to help people, like not only wanting to help people, but feeling capable of helping people. And that, led me to where I am today.
One of the main arcs through this podcast is really trying to showcase that you can be tough and soft. How has this job brought those two things together for you? And like, how are you now bringing this journey to the compassion and the kindness and the understanding you show to the people you're helping?
That's such a huge balance in this job, being that tough and soft. That's a great way to put it. Because you become, especially in this profession, you become that person that people rely on their absolute worst moment of their lives. And that can be an extremely heavy burden to bear on your shoulders if you don't have that. It'd be like building a mansion on top of the foundation for a tent, right? It'll all collapse under you. That softness, where I feel my past has benefited where I am now, is that level of empathy for that person. Because, often people you talk to, I'm sure you've gotten it in your entire career, like they think we just fight fire and that's what we do. But that's so not the case, right? Your medical calls now especially are higher probably than they've ever been. In the municipality I'm in, there's a really big drug problem. So we're at these calls all the time, and I feel so blessed with being able to have that level of empathy and understanding that sometimes these people need, because workplace fatigue is so real when you're seeing the same calls all the time. And what I love is not just for myself, but the guys I work with, my crew, they are constantly asking me questions about kind of my experience and learning from my experience when they're working with these people out in the streets and coming across these calls. They've told me that it's built their understanding of this. And because it is, you need to be You need to be so tough all the time. And it's so easy to forget that level of softness that sometimes a person needs, and that understanding that a person needs to maybe make it to that next step. And even if 1 in 5, 1 in 10 only make it to that next step, that's still a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter that lives today because of that, right?
It's easy for us to see a snapshot of someone's life for 15 minutes and make a snap judgment that we walk away, we get in the truck, we have quote unquote have our life together, and that person doesn't. And we judge them on that. Have there been conversations about that, or how you see people with hope and knowing that people can and will recover sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right. It's so easy to walk away and you're living your comfortable life. You almost forget, and it sounds awful, but you almost forget that it's a human being that you're talking to, and a human being that you're dealing with their own story and their own troubles. And not everybody is going to go the path of recovery. But again, like we just said, the ones that do, when you see that hope, when you see that spark in a person that they don't, or sometimes it's the wake up call. When we're there, that is the rock bottom, right? And you can see it in their eyes that, oh, this person might stand a chance. And I think what helps us on the job, or at least for me, what I love, even just a quick word of, there's meetings you can go to, there's knowing your district and knowing the areas, the resources for these people, just offering that solution, because sometimes it's a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of knowing. They don't know that the resources are out there.
Is there things that we can communicate in those moments to humanize them even to themselves and let them know that they still have value, that there's still possibility?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Far be it for me, 2 years on the job, to ever, what I don't know could fill a warehouse. I've talked to the guys in my crew and have said, like, I may be new to this job, but I'm definitely not new to life. And I'm definitely not new to that life. What I have found, and for myself, and now working on the end of, volunteering in that world, I know time isn't always time is often of the essence for us, to get back and be back on the road and back on the calls. But it's having that quick conversation of knowing the person's name, and even, do you have any kids? Are you married? Do you, hey, does your mom live in the city? Does your dad live in the city? Or just trying to find some sort of linchpin that you can hold on to, that would be that reminder that there is somebody that cares, right? Because it is so hard, especially us in uniform, anybody in uniform. I know of being in that world, it's very little trust with anybody in uniform, anybody with authority, right? So to remind them of the people that are there, I know for me, that was so valuable. And we've talked about it, in those darkest days that I had, even just thinking of my mom prevented me from doing something horrific. Sometimes finding that is the key.
Even though the thinking of your family and friends and loved ones was what kept you here, thankfully, was it hard to, on top of everything else you were dealing with, was there some kind of shame and guilt attached to preventing you from going? Was it something extra to bear, knowing that you had to potentially stay and suffer so that other people wouldn't suffer?
It's referred to as selfish, the most selfish thing in the world is to end your life. But it's so ingrained, at least for me, I only want to speak for myself, but I know when speaking to a lot of other people, they felt that way. It's so ingrained that you're hurting everyone around you because you're suffering so much, right? And you almost become like an Eeyore of life, that you're just depressed around everybody, or even when you're hiding it, you're telling yourself that you're everyone else's burden because you're who you are. That's where that shame kicks in, that you almost convince yourself that by being alive, I'm being selfish, that I'm draining, I'm a happiness vampire to everybody else. And I'm just sucking it all up by destroying myself, my physical being and my spiritual being. That's the only way to keep everyone else safe.
So it seems selfish either way.
Exactly. That there were so many days that I'd wake up that morning and still be alive. It's very much, it becomes, especially in severe active addiction, it becomes not an if, it's a when. You're going to eventually not wake up. And there'd be so many mornings I'd wake up and I thought, oh man, it didn't happen, and now everybody's got to deal with me again.
What would you say to even guys on the job that are possibly struggling and hiding and thinking that they have a handle on it?
You gotta talk. We are our own worst enemies as addicts and alcoholics. Our secrets grow in the dark. So you gotta get them out into the light, even if it's to one person. The entire AA structure started. Bill W. is the founder of AA and Dr. Bob. Bill W., at that time, they were locking alcoholics up in sanitariums. It was a moral deficiency, it was considered. And Bill W. eventually went to a church and asked the pastor, is there anybody that I can speak to? And he said, you know what, there is a guy here. It was Dr. Bob. He suffers from the same problem with drinking as you. Maybe go talk to him. And they sat down one afternoon and ended up talking for hours. And at the end of that conversation, Bill said, I don't feel like drinking. And Bob said, I don't either. You want to do this again tomorrow? And that was the first AA meeting. And so that's all it takes, is finding a person you can trust, that you can just talk. You have to talk. So that was a big reason why I was so excited about this podcast with you, is even if one firefighter or even a non-firefighter, anybody hears this and thinks, you know what, maybe he's a guy I want to talk to, please reach out to me. It's part of the service of the 12 step is it's a pay it forward service. You're always looking for that next addict or alcoholic to help and be there for. You need to find that person, that community, that group, because there's absolutely 0% chance you'll get through it on your own.
Yeah, Gabor Mate said, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. And that was even highlighted recently. I watched a reel within the last couple of days of a woman that had gone in to do work in prisons, and they're in the yard, and there's 235 men there all standing in this massive circle. And she starts asking them, okay, if you've experienced this trauma in your life, take a step forward. And she does this over and over and over again with these different things. And most of them, the vast majority, end up very, very close to the center, right? And then they speak afterwards in the integration of that experience of how much the awareness that they weren't the only one. And one even said, I felt guilty because there was a time when she asked, have you experienced this? And I was embarrassed to step forward, and I didn't, right? And in that moment, seeing the other men step forward gave him the courage then and he said, after that, I took every step that I wanted to answer truthfully because they gave me the courage to do that. So the feeling of not being alone in your pain and understanding that it's caused by pain and not caused by some moral deficiency was huge.
And it's so fascinating that sometimes needing that other people for that courage. I'm not sure how you've been in your life. For me, I'm always someone that doesn't shut up. So speaking in the meetings was very easy, but it's such a beautiful thing to see, that someone at their first meeting, you could tell they're hyper shy and hyper afraid to share, but then the courage they get, not from people saying, oh, no, come on, share, because that would never happen, but just people doing it and being vulnerable and honest on who they are. Because especially out in the streets, like you need to protect everything, right? Like, it's not just physical possessions. It's you can't give yourself away out there because it'll get taken. Everything will get taken. So you become so accustomed and so used to protecting yourself and protecting everything inside that I think seeing that vulnerability of other people sharing and other people speaking and just throwing themselves out there, it almost makes you want to do it. You get FOMO of, oh, I want that. Right. So it's a really cool thing to see people gather courage from the crowd.
Mm-hmm. How did you get started in going to groups and schools and talking and sharing, and what's that experience been like for you?
The groups was a mandatory thing with the family. Like you're going to meetings, right? And I thought it was going to be a bunch of crap. I'll be the first to admit it. I thought there's no way this works. So I started in AA. It's helped so many people. It's so wonderful. Obviously, my problems were much deeper than alcohol. And I'll never forget, and this isn't every AA meeting, so I don't want to scare anybody from going to AA, but it was a Sunday morning. We finished the meeting, and I came outside, and there was a guy smoking a joint, and he took a big haul on it, and he goes, man, isn't recovery beautiful? And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like, I can't do that. Right? I thought, because I've always been someone, you give me anything and I'm going to go to the extreme. It's how it's going to be. Right? So sure, I could smoke a joint with that guy that day and maybe be fine, but I'm going to end up with a needle in me by the end of the week. It's just the reality. Someone had mentioned Narcotics Anonymous. But then there was all this chatter in Yale about narcotics. Well, no, they do drugs right in the meetings at NA, right? So even in the recovery community, there's stigmas, right? It's so interesting. Oh no, they're just doing drugs there and getting high. Like you won't find recovery there. Well, there was one in the town we were living, Caledonia. That was the first NA meeting I ever went to, and that was the one where I referenced earlier of walking in, everybody handing me their coat. And when I walked out of that meeting, my mom was waiting in the parking lot. And I got in the car and she said that, Gav, this is the first time I've seen you actually smile in years. I guess I had a big smile on my face, and it wasn't a smirk. It wasn't a grin, right? It was a real smile. And she was blown away on at my face. So after that, it was literally meeting. I went to a meeting every single day because it's what I was told I had to do in the meetings. I'm very good at following recipes. I'm not a great cook. I'm not a great baker, but I can follow a recipe with the best of them. And that was the recipe that was given to me. Go to meetings every single day because every self-respecting addict will get addicted to it. Right? If you do something enough times in a row, you're going to get addicted to it. So that's what I did. And even at that time, I was throwing up at meetings because I was going through withdrawal, and it was nothing but love and understanding from everybody. So I kept going and kept coming back. And that grew into, there's this, you can volunteer for these meetings. You can come early and set up, and there's always coffee and snacks, and the chairs get set up. And one of the really cool things I liked about the recovery, like the 12-step meetings in general, and all of them do this, is we live by the understanding that we've taken so much from society. We don't want to take any more. So we're all self-sustaining. So we don't take any donations from anybody outside of the community. We have tradition goes around, a basket gets passed around, and you put in what you can to be there. And if you don't have anything, that's okay too. I remember my first meeting, I looked at the guy beside me and I said, man, I don't have any money to give. And he looked at me and he said, I'm putting in a guitar pick. You can put in anything you want, man. Right? Like, so, but that money that is generated, generally they're held at churches. We pay the church a monthly rent. Every single church offers it to us for free. We pay a monthly rent. It's part of the process, right? Of giving back to what we've taken. That's part of it. So it's all volunteer run. So immediately I jumped onto that. And it was selfish purposes. It was for my own recovery. I thought I need to do this to be okay. And so I volunteered for everything I could. I became a representative for the meeting. I started going to area meetings. Every area has like a big meeting where area representatives show up to that. So I started going to that meeting. And then I started volunteering to talk at the detoxes, things like that. And it just, all the speaking is you're just sharing your journey, right? In hopes that somebody there will grasp onto it and come for the ride. There's no judgment. You do find a higher power, but that higher power can be anything you want. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. There's no judgment. Any race, creed, anything is welcome. Religion doesn't matter. And I love that openness. So volunteering in that world, it became naturally, but it also became essential to my survival and recovery.
What about sharing your story outside of those groups? My
wife always jokes that I will tell everybody and anybody my story. I'm probably an oversharer, but it's, to me, I know the stigmas, and I know I understand how a large portion of society still looks at addiction, still looks at drug abuse. Specifically, alcohol abuse has come a long way. Drug abuse still is lagging a bit in that. To me, it almost became a sense of pride of where I came from and where I was. And even if that was my only sense of pride, it was something tangible I could hold on to, that I did this and I got here, and I couldn't have done it without my family and my friends and everybody supporting me. But still, at the end of the day, I was there and now I'm here. So I've never had a problem with sharing that.
And what groups have you gone out to? Have you been to schools, or what are the community groups that you tend to speak with?
There was the Detox in Hamilton that I was speaking at for a while. And then there was a teacher that I met, not through the meetings. I met her outside, like through, I can't remember, I think it was through real estate. But she said, I do an employment thing where people come in and talk about their jobs, but would you want to come in and kind of mix talking about your job with your experience in life? And she said, you can be as open and honest as you want. It's a high school class, get as real as you want. And so then I started doing that, and I found a ton of enjoyment in it. Doing the speaking, that is something I've gotten better at over the years. It's definitely a skill, public speaking. It's probably not showing too well in this podcast because this was a little bit nerve-wracking because I'm a big listener. So it was a little different for me. but it's something I really, really enjoy. I love getting the tale out there, but more importantly, I love the people that come up and talk to me afterwards and can relate or share their journey or share their story, or even they don't have to be in recovery, share where they're at and where they want to be is sometimes the best ones.
You're early on in your career, but are you feeling drawn to certain topics or areas of the job that you want to really do a deep dive in?
In terms of like this stuff, like I really want to be a part of the peer support team that my service offers. We have firefighters helping firefighters. There's a support team. Anytime there's a bad call, a firefighter struggling, they can reach out to the support team. And I really feel equipped for that, especially in the world of addiction and mental health crises. I would love to be a part of that team and help where I can. In terms of the job itself, the station I've been at for the past year, it's a tech rescue station, and I've fallen in love with everything tech rescue. It's a phenomenal spot. I love the guys I work with. My captain is a phenomenal guy. He's a hardcore guy, loves training, loves the job. We often joke that maybe he cares too much because he gets hyper passionate about it, but he's someone, in the year I've been with him, I've learned more than I think I could have anywhere else in the fire service. Like he's taught me so much.
I mean, obviously you've listened to this podcast, but outside of this, what would you recommend for new firefighters or just firefighters in general? Like what content are you consuming early in your career right now that you find super valuable?
We've got 4 kids at the house now. We have two biological, and then we're the legal guardians for 2 children as well. So I kind of reset the clock at almost 40. I have a baby at home again. So it's hard to find time, but for the new, like definitely podcasts are a huge thing for me. This one specifically, and then the Weekly Scrap, I'm a huge fan of as well. I love that podcast. But the biggest thing I recommend to anybody, and still myself as a new, is talking to other firefighters. Try to get involved in it. I know not everybody has the chance to be a volunteer firefighter, but just speaking to other firefighters has done more for me in my mental readiness than anything else it could be. So just being part of that community and diving in, even if you got to be that annoying new guy and trying to be friends with some guys that have been on the job for a long time, right? Like it was so valuable to me. And then being at SFA and talking to you, talking to Brad, talking to Jesse, and just not only about the job, but just talking, for me, what helped was just talking on a normal level and learning the personalities and how to hold yourself and things like that really helped me fit in quickly when I got into the job.
Let's finish off by talking about how your family's expanded and the joy that that's bringing you.
Yeah, it comes back to, again, it was that right thing to do and be there to help somebody. We were blessed with 2 of our own biological sons, Connor and Liam. I told Liam I'd shout him out on this because he's going to be listening for sure. So Lee, that one's for you, buddy. So Connor and Liam, they're born a day apart, but years separating them. So Connor's turning 13, July 21st. Liam's turning 9, July 22nd. And then this past winter in November, hidden to the family, they're actually struggling in the same world we've been talking about this whole podcast. And CAS had gotten involved and took the kids away, a little boy and a little girl, and they were in foster care. So we decided that the best thing we could do is provide a home that is, blood relation and full of love. And we put our names in the hat. CAS came. They decided that we were the right fit for the kids. And they've been with us since. So a 4-year-old boy and a little girl who turned 1 in February. And it's been so much excitement and chaos and joy. And it's been a lot of struggle as well, kind of, again, resetting those clocks and having a baby again. Something as simple as going to Avondale is a challenge when you have a baby. Those little things you take for granted in life that you kind of forget as your kids get older. Going through all of that and the diapers, so many diapers. So that's been, even for me personally, like I've had all boys. So the changing of a little girl is a total different experience of changing a little boy, right? So that doing all of that, but when they smile, when they see us and seeing them develop and providing that loving home and stability for them has been so worth all of the hard parts. It's been so cool to be able to see them and, the little girl taking her first steps and speaking her first words and all of that. You forget those moments with your own kids. as they get older, you forget that spark that you see and the curiosity. And it relates back to what we were talking about being a perpetual student. They're the originators, those babies, right? They're soaking in everything. It's like, that's what I want to be. I want to just take in the world and be excited about it. And a big, strong part of recovery is the past is all depression. The future's anxiety. You got to stay in the present, right? It's where you're safe is right there. Babies do that so naturally. So taking in that has been a really cool thing. And then, I coach jiu-jitsu, a kids class 3 nights a week. So seeing these kids grow and flourish, and I coach ball hockey, my oldest son's ball hockey team, I coach that team. And so kids really bring me so much joy in being around them and seeing their excited little faces. It's really, in a weird way, it does help my recovery and my mental state every day.
Awesome. How can people reach out to you if they want to reach out and connect?
Yeah, so I'm not big on social media. By that, I mean I have none. So I'm hoping, Scott, I'll be able to provide you with my cell phone number and my email. And I'm more than comfortable that if anybody were to reach out to you and want to speak to me, I'm an open book. I'm more than willing to talk to anybody.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad we're connected. This was great.
Yes, sir. It was an absolute pleasure.